Good morning, good morning. We have our friend Chris Doering with the SEC Network. Hell of a football player for the Florida Gators. Coached under one of my favorite coaches, Steve Spurrier. And then almost a decade in the NFL. CD joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. And the show is driven by your next Ford Explorer at Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson, the #1 Ford dealership in the state of Mississippi. Mack Hike Ford for your next Ford Explorer or Ford F-150 truck, pre-owned or new. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. CD, good morning. Where are you, buddy?
Well, I'm in Gainesville right now, man, but my travel looks like it's going to be a little disruptive with the storm coming through. So I was trying to weigh the options of getting out today or driving to an alternate airport, but I think a lot of people beat me to today's flight. So I'll be driving to Orlando tomorrow and then flying to Charlotte to try to get there for shows this weekend.
Okay. Well, you know I love that show. I got to hit it on Saturday and on Sunday morning, so let's jump right into it, my man. We've got a big one in Tuscaloosa. We've got Georgia at Bama, and who do you like and why? I want to start with the line of scrimmage. Do you think this is a push? Do you like one unit over the other? Before we get to the outside and the speed and the athleticism, let's start with the line of scrimmage.
Let's start with framing the game here real quick. I want you to tell me if you agree with me or not here. I think this is the biggest regular season game in Kirby Smart's tenure there in Athens. I think with the pressure of knowing what the record's been against Alabama, with the fact that Nick Saban's no longer on that sideline and you can't use that as an excuse anymore. I think with the way you look at Georgia's schedule the rest of the way, having to go to Oxford, having to go to Austin, having to play Tennessee at home, the margin for error shrinks considerably if you don't win this ball game. You haven't won any sort of championship since 2022. I know it's not too long, but by Georgia standards, present Georgia standards, that's a long time. I think this is a massive game, and I think the pressure is squarely on Georgia and Kirby Smart with really nothing to lose necessarily for Alabama.
No, I agree because CD last year going into the game with the SEC championship game, and it was a hell of a game, all we heard was Georgia. Georgia was going to win that game, okay? And Georgia was a better football team, and Saban and Bama won, as you know. So I agree with you, and it's crazy to say this, DeBoer and Bama may be playing with a little house money.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And my expectation level for Alabama this year was not as high as some. I kind of had them going 9-3. I thought there would be an acclimation period with Kalen DeBoer figuring things out here in the SEC. I thought that, their roster still had some holes in it, as everyone's does, as a result of NIL. Even Georgia, you look at how thin they are up the middle on the defensive line and some other positions. It just doesn't feel the same way. I think it's the new reality of college football. But I agree with you there, and I look at the game as you asked me. It's so crazy because I think early in the season you try to extrapolate something you can project forward from such a small sample size. And after the USF game, I was completely out on Alabama, watching how bad they were on the offensive line, watching all the penalties, 13 in that game, watching the turnovers and lack of real control. And then I watch them play Wisconsin, and they clean all of that up and just look like they're a machine pumping on all cylinders. And then conversely, watching Georgia struggle the way they did against Kentucky. And it's not just the score that matters to me. It's the way they went about playing. It's the lack of sense of urgency. It's the offensive line missing some blocks, the outside not blocking well on runs and screen plays that you're typically able to break more yards for. It's the way you rush the quarterback and the lack of integrity with your rush lanes. Something Georgia always is really good at is playing their assignments and being team-oriented. And so, I made the statement the other day, I wonder if they've lost that edge a little bit. I wonder if there's a sense of complacency that's set in with Georgia after winning, as much as they have here lately. And Urban Meyer made the statement back after, Florida had won 2 championships in 3 years. He said a lot of these young guys, have woken up on third base and never had a plate appearance, and you think that they're just entitled to win championships. And now with the NIL stuff, I see these guys walking around with Louis Vuitton luggage and wearing nice clothes and driving nice cars, and I wonder if a little bit of the sense of urgency is not there anymore. The edge that they had for 4 decades trying to get that monkey off their back, the hunger and the drive that they had in that back-to-back championship seasons, like, doesn't seem like it's there to me. And I think there's a concern that maybe Kirby doesn't have their ear the same way that he used to. Certainly, you look at the traffic violations, another violation a couple weeks ago, over 100 miles an hour in the rain. Like, clearly something's not getting through to these guys, and I wonder if it translates to not being able to really get through to these guys on the field the same way too.
So with all that, they haven't been as healthy as they wanted to be on the defensive line after Clemson, because that was a physical ball game, CD, even though they dominated in the second half. They've now had a week off just like Alabama. If they're healthy on the D-line, or more healthy on the D-line, with what you've seen to date, how do you handicap their front 6 or 7 against Alabama's run game, but especially if Milroe loses containment, or if they? Yeah.
I mean, that's the most important thing. The way that and Milroe changes the way that defenses can defend that offense. You have to be very careful in terms of what you're doing. And the way you go about with some of your games up front. You don't want to get caught out of position. He does a good job of finding lanes and hitting them and going. Obviously, you have to set the edge and keep that rush integrity that we talked about a little bit earlier. But I also think that, getting if you look at Caden Proctor, I mean, coming back into that lineup, it was a totally different offensive line against Wisconsin than it was the previous game against South Florida. Now, I would probably argue that the talent for USF may be better than what Wisconsin has right now. So I don't know that there's a ton that you can may not be able to compare apples to apples there. But I do think that just from the standpoint of you said the first 6 or 7, I think Georgia's really good when they're healthy on their front line. But the depth, particularly in the middle of that defense, is what concerns me too. And so, you get that 1-2 punch going with some of the running backs and Milroe. It makes it very difficult to contain. Now, the thing that I'm interested in seeing is maybe Milroe's just this guy that goes out and completes 15 of 19 passes and throws some shorter throws and takes a couple shots and hits a few. But like, if Georgia can keep him in the pocket and force him to have to throw the ball consistently, I don't know if he can do it. And 2, who else besides Ryan Williams do we really have confidence in? You've seen moments. Jeremy Bernard caught a touchdown against Wisconsin the other day. But, like, who are those guys? I think that's one of the things I wanted to know during the bye week is, could you develop a complement to Ryan Williams in case they're able to take him away and keep Milroe in the pocket?
Chris Doering with the SEC Network talking Georgia-Bama. All right, let's flip it over here with Carson Beck. It's so funny. We have listeners who like him, and this is anybody, any team, anybody, and we have listeners who think he's A.J. McCarron. I think he's better than that, but as you look at what Georgia – like, they couldn't run the ball against Kentucky, okay? Yeah. So, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to run the ball the rest of the season, but it may mean that they could struggle on Saturday. So what do you take away from that, CD, as you look at what Georgia wants to do? Kirby likes to ball control, and then go get you as his defense starts to impose your will. Do you think he's looking at are we looking at like an NFL game where everybody's testing each other out the first few possessions, and this thing maybe one score, maybe another score from a team? I mean, is that how you see this thing going before, or do you think one or both of the coaches could go get it, so to speak, CD?
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the way we've watched this matchup over the years. It's a little bit of that boxing match, and each guy trying to just take some shots to figure out what the game plan is, and then really starting to let it rip later in the game. And that last year you go back and look, and Alabama made some great in-game adjustments on both sides of the ball, and that kind of was the difference in the game. So I think you'll see kind of the same thing. Particularly, Georgia is always going to be under Kirby Smart a little bit more conservative, and they are going to defer to the defense probably, and finding yourself down a couple scores early in the game because you made some mistakes is not the game plan for success going into Tuscaloosa. I also think you go back and look a little bit at what Texas did last year when they went into Tuscaloosa. They were the more physical team on the lines of scrimmage, and I guarantee you Kirby's preaching that this week, that they got to do the same thing. You talked about imposing their will. Nobody imposes the will better than Georgia in recent history. But I do think that, as you asked about Carson Beck, I had him as my number one quarterback heading into the conference this year. I had him as my Heisman favorite as well. But a couple factors I look at. His play wasn't great against Kentucky. He wasn't all that accurate, which was surprising to me. But I questioned Alabama's receivers. I questioned the Georgia receivers even more. Like, I don't see a whole lot that I'm overly impressed with those guys right now. And then the run game, Georgia's always going to run the ball first, and it was really surprising for them not to be able to do that. And if you don't have the ability to run the ball against Alabama, and you are asking Carson Beck to go win it, throwing the ball, 35 times a game, I don't know that that's a recipe for success either. So I think the run game, the offensive line specifically, may be the biggest key to this game.
Chris Doering, SEC Network on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. All right, let's go to Ole Miss and Kentucky in Oxford. It's an 11 a.m. kick. Ole Miss is almost a 3-touchdown favorite. Is that too many points for you, CD?
It seems like a lot of points because is there anybody we know less about in the SEC right now than Ole Miss? I mean, in the preseason we talked about Missouri and Ole Miss kind of having a similar schedule with some lighter opponents in the beginning and ramping things up. Missouri ended up being a little different schedule with how good Boston College has been to this point, and Vandy exceeding expectations. So I feel like they've been tested a little bit more, but I really don't know. I think Ole Miss is really good. I had them going to the SEC title game in the preseason. They've been lighting it up with subpar opposition on the other side, but can they still continue to do that? I do worry a little bit about the secondary for Ole Miss, but I don't think that's anything that Kentucky's going to necessarily be able to exploit. Obviously, this is going to be a much more physical game. Coach Stoops' team got their grind back a little bit after being embarrassed by South Carolina. They returned to their blue collar nature and really committed to being better on the line of scrimmage, running the ball better. I thought Vandegrift has improved, but I don't know that there's anybody when you're clicking on all cylinders. I don't know that there's anybody that can score with Ole Miss. So I think the key for Kentucky is trying to keep those explosive plays in front of them, make them drive the length of the field, and make them convert into touchdowns in the red zone. If things don't click on offense, we've known Lane Kiffin to get a little impatient, and that could work in the favor of Kentucky. But I do think this is a great test for them before they really get into the heart of the SEC schedule.
Yeah, I can't wait if they just dominate or if Kentucky hangs around for a little while or all day. He is CD, Chris Doering on the Out of Bounds show. I didn't think Hugh Freeze, what he said about his quarterback and running back was that earth-shattering. And I think if you listen to the whole, not just the cut that made Twitter, he blamed himself, and then he blamed, and then he put some blame on players. I'm okay with that because it's a big boy league, and if you're playing, you're 19, 20, 21, your expected results matter and production and so on. However, Twitter freaked out, and that's fine too. Now take out the Bo Wallace stuff. Just what Freeze said. Did that bother you, or did you just shrug it off? What was your reaction?
I mean, I played for a guy in Coach Spurrier that always took the blame. Now, whether he was being authentic with taking the blame or just saying that, it is another story. But I think the worst thing that you can do is try to place blame on individual players through the media. Nick Saban is a master, Coach Cal, a master, speaking to his team through the media, but I don't know that it is singled out to certain players the same way that it kind of felt like it was with Hugh Freeze. And honestly, you don't need to look anywhere more than the mirror because he went all in on Peyton Thorne.
True.
I mean, he had an opportunity to go in the portal and try to upgrade at that position. He felt like, surrounding Peyton Thorne with better talent was going to yield better results. He thought by inserting himself into the game planning and play calling a little bit more that would help Peyton Thorne. He thought that working on a more consistent basis with the quarterbacks would help. It has not so far to this point in time. So I do think there's a lot of blame as it relates to not having more forethought. And really, he's always been known as this guy that develops quarterbacks and puts them in positions to be successful in his offense. And right now, that has not been the case. You look at turnover margin, they are by far dead last in the SEC by almost 2.5 times. And and not only are you turning the ball over, you're not getting any turnovers defensively. So it's a tough situation to be in. And let's not forget, man, we talked about their schedule all preseason, a weird schedule where they're at home for the first month of the season. Then they go on the road for the entire month of October, and then they're back home for the month of November. We never thought that they would lose. I didn't think they'd lose one game, let alone two, with that schedule and the home field advantage. Now you leave Jordan Hare for the entire month of October coming up here soon. This is a massive game on Saturday for them against Oklahoma, and I'm more interested in. Bo, if I gave you set the total at 3.5 quarterbacks played in this game between the two teams, you taking the over?
I may take the over with what Venables came out and said on Monday and the way that Hugh's all over the place, yeah. CD, because Oklahoma doesn't have their stuff together on offense either, and October 1 is right around the corner. And I just believe you either do or you don't. By this time in the year, even though we're only 4 games in. I think it's a great point. Venables desperately needs a W. Hugh desperately needs a W.
I was pissed off watching the game, and it took me back to last year. It took me to LSU. Like, Oklahoma has a really good defense, and if you just had an average offense, you got a chance to be pretty good this year. And it reminded me of that Jaden Daniels-led offense that had just a brutal compliment on the defensive side. Like, it made me start thinking, too, about the SEC. How many teams do you look at and say, man, that's a complete team? I think Texas is a complete team. I think Tennessee is a complete team. Not sure about Alabama or Georgia yet. Not sure about Ole Miss. Missouri's been a little underwhelming. I think there's some really good units and some really good quarterbacks, but I don't think there's any teams right now that I'm 100% sure on outside of Tennessee and Texas that have good offense, good defense, and good quarterback leading the way.
I agree with you. Now, the 5 teams you referenced, those are the teams, Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and Ole Miss. But I just, like you said, I need to see more from Ole Miss and from Bama and Georgia. Tennessee and Texas.
You write Missouri off?
I am.
Yeah.
I just didn't. But look, I recognize what Drinkwitz has done and who they are. And he's done a good job, and they have some top-end talent, but I'm not surprised that they're not what we thought. Now, they pull a pretty it may not be quite as good as Ole Miss's schedule or Tennessee's schedule or Texas for that. But, well, no, Texas has Georgia.
Texas is a little more challenging.
Yeah, it is. But I like, I like that schedule. I still think they're going to get rolled a couple of times. So we'll see how that looks. All right. I got a couple of minutes here. A&M, this one has been full of fireworks since you joined the SEC network, and even for the last 10 or so years, A&M and Arkansas more times than not has been an absolute blast. Arkansas, I think Taylon Green can flat out ball. A&M's still trying to figure out what they've got with Connor Wigman not playing and Marcel Reed. So handicap this one for me in Cowboy Stadium.
It's funny. I think about Arkansas. They've been brutal to watch the last couple of years.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden, it's exciting as hell. I made the analogy on the show the other day, like it's like going to the county fair because the thrill of riding the roller coasters going up and down is one thing, but not knowing who put the rides together, the hands that put those things together, and the thought you might actually die is even more exhilarating, right? So, like, you watch Taylon Green, it's amazing to watch him navigate the offense out there and beat the blitz single-handedly with his legs, and Jaquinda Jackson and what he's done running the football. The defense is better. But I just worry about that big play ability from Taylon Green can also be so detrimental with the feeling of like, that you're on the verge of something really bad happening. I think Arkansas is a really good team, and it's a shame that they lost and played poorly in that second half against Oklahoma State. But I think it helped them grow into who they are now. You go back and look in the second half against Auburn. They had 3 straight drives in the third quarter and into the fourth quarter where they scored points. 2 of them were 75-yard touchdown drives. So when they needed to move the ball and score, they did. When they needed to get a stop at the end, when things got tight, they did. And I think they learned a lot from that Oklahoma State loss and the collapse in the second half. I think this is a team that's going to catch a lot of people, and I still don't really know who Texas A&M is. I'm sure they ran the ball all over Florida, but so did Mississippi State, and they're brutal running the football. So
That's true.
I really don't know who they are. I think Marcel Reed makes them better, but I would lean towards Arkansas right now. I mean, Coach Pittman told us in the preseason at Media Days, he said, I really like this team, and if I didn't, I just wouldn't say anything. And I think we're starting to see what he liked about the team in the preseason. It's a fun team. It's a much more competitive team, and I think they got more big play ability than what I've seen from Texas A&M to this point.
Yeah, Taylon Green can ball. I mean, I get that what you're saying. There's some risks there, but like him or not, Petrino is really, really good as an OC and a play caller.
Yeah. And
so him going against Elko, who's really, really good as a DC and a play caller, holy smokes, this could be some fun at Cowboy Stadium. All right, dude, thanks so much for your time this week. Look forward to watching y'all this weekend, and let's catch up again soon, okay?
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Glad it worked out. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, CD. Chris Doering with the SEC Network, former Gator Great under Steve Spurrier, wide receiver, and then played 9 years in the NFL. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. That was fun. So we did a deep dive into Georgia, Bama. I don't expect a lot. I think it's going to be super close. There's just line of scrimmage. Somebody will find a fingernail Jackson of an edge. You will have an explosive play from someone on the field as the game plays out. And then we're all keeping an eye on Milroe and his legs. And if at some point in time, as good as Kirby and Georgia is on that side of the football, at some point in time, will they break down and he can rip off a run and change the game? I think that's the way. Oh, and by the way, field goal kicking, because it may be hard to get some points at times. So, who's going to hit a 35, 43, 47-yarder early or late that means the world in a close game? We'll see. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're brought to you by Ryan Drew at United Country Southern States Realty. Are you looking to buy hunting land right now? You want to go with the group that can put you on the land that you want. Dream recreational hunting land. Ryan Drew, United Country Southern States Realty. Call Ryan today, 601-594-2279. Ryan Drew with United Country Southern States Realty.